Tansei, I'm Kristen Ashkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. The entire Wabaseemoong First Nation, located northwest of Kenora, Ontario, is being evacuated this week due to wildfires in the area. Kenora Fire 20 has now grown to more than 23,000 hectares and continues to grow larger, causing significant smoke in the area and posing a serious risk to Wabaseemoong's community members. On Thursday, leadership says the wildfire is now only 2.5 kilometers away due to a change in wind direction. Kenora Fire 14 is also burning 12 kilometers away as well. Chief and Council there says there is no road access to the community following an emergency order put in place since Tuesday. They say this is a very stressful time and only emergency personnel can enter the community at this point. Some animals who were left behind in the community have also been rescued. Fire crews continue to fight the blazes there. It's been more than 4 years since an Innu man, Wabaseemoong Lakjon, died due to hypothermia while experiencing homelessness in Montreal. At a press conference on Thursday, Coroner Stephanie Gamache released a report on Raphael Naba Andre's death. With more, here's APTN Savannah Craig.
Wabaseemoong Lakjon Chief Riel Mackenzie says he traveled 12 hours to Montreal to hear the coroner's report on the death of Raphael Naba Andre. But he still can't understand why no one helped prevent his death.
You have an enter like new room? Come on, forget the rules and come in, my son. Come in, my friend. That's a human being. That's what we should do.
Naba, an Innu man from Wabaseemoong Lakjon, passed away in 2021 after being refused entry in the open-door homeless shelter due to COVID regulations. Naba's autopsy identified that he died due to hypothermia while sheltering in a porta-potty near the open door, where he sought refuge during Quebec's COVID-19 nightly curfew.
Il faut s'indigner du constat que plusieurs portes ont été fermées à M. André dans les jours précédant son décès et le soir du 16 janvier 2021.
Coroner Stephanie Gamache is putting forth 23 recommendations to avoid a similar situation from happening again.
J'ai identifié 5 thèmes sur lesquels mes recommandations sont basées.
They include ensuring a centralized follow-up for homeless people seeking various healthcare institutions, developing a site welcoming intoxicated clientele with acquired brain injury, assisting homeless people in a culturally safe way, considering the specific needs of vulnerable people in emergency contexts, and the need to ensure permanent funding for emergency accommodation. She says these recommendations are addressed to the province of Quebec and City of Montreal.
Il faut tous reconnaître que son décès était évitable.
Gamache says Indigenous people make up 1% of Montreal's total population, but account for 13% of people experiencing visible homelessness, according to 2022 data. She says this signals to the need for all healthcare network workers to develop culturally secure approaches.
La réalité autochtone de M. André et l'absence de services culturellement sécuritaires autour de lui ont constitué des défis supplémentaires dans son parcours. Fier de sa culture et de sa communauté, c'est lorsque M. André a pu s'exprimer par des projets d'art qui intégraient ses origines qu'il a connu un certain bien-être dans sa trajectoire de soins et de services.
Chief Mackenzie says he's bringing this report back to Wabaseemoong Lakjon to share it with his community.
I have a responsibility to explain the whole case. That we will not take the time, especially for the family of Napa Andre and the rest of my community. And the whole nation about that history, we're all holding together to hope that happen again. That's it.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
To BC now, where a Vancouver mother is demanding answers from her son's elementary school, and the Vancouver School Board saying a substitute teacher took her son to change in a basement closet. CTV's Isabella Zavarisi has that story.
So this is the shirt that I sent him in. It was not dirty.
Jasmine Barahona's 6-year-old son wore that shirt to school last Wednesday, but it wasn't what he returned home in, prompting questions from his mom.
He said a man took me to the basement and changed him in a closet. I immediately tried to hold my cool.
She called her son's school, Hapay Elementary in East Vancouver, demanding to know what happened. The next day she met with the principal, who told her a substitute was working that day, but couldn't provide more details.
I want you to tell me who was in the basement with my child. That's it. That's all I want. And if something did go further than what we're assuming, then I want justice.
Barahona, along with the principal and an advocate, felt it was best for her son, who is on the autism spectrum, to meet with a therapist. Nearly a week later, that still has not happened.
This school is primarily Indigenous folk and families who come from all types of backgrounds, all types of trauma.
CTV News spoke with another parent whose daughter went to Hapay. She said her daughter experienced a similar incident when a teacher changed her in the basement. She eventually pulled her daughter out of the school. The Vancouver Police Department says it's working with the VSB to gather more information. CTV News asked the VSB for an interview, but no one was made available. The board confirms it received an inquiry raising this concern, saying, quote, "Student safety and well-being is always the top priority, and we take concerns very seriously."
And that's what came home.
Barahona's son hasn't been back to class since Thursday. He's only been at the school for 1 month. His mother says she doesn't want to move him again.
Why does he have to be punished? Why is his routine uprooted? Why isn't the school being held accountable for that as well?
Isabella Zavarisi, CTV News, Vancouver.
The legislature spring sitting has concluded in Alberta this week, just after the passing of several contentious bills. That includes one bill that would make a vote on separation easier in Alberta. It's a move First Nation leaders say they plan to fight. Some chiefs say their relationship with Premier Danielle Smith and her government is over. CTV's Shalan Skolsky reports.
The ayes have it.
A bill that will lower the threshold for Alberta to vote to separate from Canada is one step closer to becoming law.
This piece of legislation was about protecting democracy, delivers fair and open elections, and restores confidence in votes. It's also about giving Albertans more direct say in government.
Calling it an opportunity for Albertans to be heard, the UCP defended Bill 54 inside the legislature. While outside, hundreds of First Nations fought it, rejecting the Premier's claims she respects treaties.
I'm very disappointed that she could say that, at the same time turn it around and turn it on to the people, the separatists, she calls it. You know what, I think though, if you want a meaning relationship, that she has to repeal that bill.
First Nations leaders from Treaties 6, 7, and 8 rallied outside the Alberta legislature Thursday, calling the UCP's Bill 54 an attack on their rights.
When our nations and our treaty are threatened, we need to come together.
They say the Premier has no standing to separate from Canada, and they are not alone.
Our message to the Premier Smith is that these are treaty lands. They are not yours to take.
The chief of Onion Lake Cree Nation is demanding a response from the province by June 6th to a lawsuit first filed against Alberta's Sovereignty Act in 2022, a challenge that could soon include Bill 54. Despite a recent amendment, the Justice Minister says will ensure nothing in a referendum under the Act is to deviate from existing treaty rights.
Guess what? They don't honor it. So it doesn't mean nothing to me.
It's just such a fundamental ignorance of the rights of the First Nations people.
One legal expert says the province is using the threat of separation as a bargaining chip while ignoring Indigenous rights.
Anytime that you talk about elections and procedure, that people will be upset because it is change. And change is coming.
MLAs are expected to return for the fall sitting in late October. Shalan Skolsky, CTV News, Edmonton.
We have more news after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Indigenous communities across Canada are turning to green energy as a way to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels, including a First Nation in Western Yukon that recently started harnessing wind to help power homes and buildings in the community. APTN's Sarah Connors has that story.
You can't miss it. This wind turbine is now powering the communities of Burwash Landing and Destruction Bay.
You can see it in the skyline, right? When you're coming down the highway. I mean, that really wakes people up to say, wow, this is actually here. And then to see the blades spinning this year and producing power is pretty amazing. Constructed
last year, its blades finally started spinning last month. The turbine is owned and operated by the Kluane First Nation. Like many communities across the north, Kluane relies on diesel.
So what we've been trying to do now is, trying to get away from burning fossil fuels.
The First Nation has long looked for greener alternatives and has already incorporated solar panels on some of its buildings. The turbine is expected to further reduce its reliance on diesel by over 300,000 liters per year. That means the community's diesel plant will be turned off about 50% of the time. Dixon says wind energy aligns with his people's traditional belief system.
Let's take care of our environment. Let's protect it for our future generations, and let's take care of our animals and everything that needs to survive, right?
We're really excited about being a part of the project.
ATCO Electric, which operates the community's diesel plant, has an electricity purchase agreement with Kluane. When the turbine is in use, it offsets the cost of running the plant.
It just helps us supply everybody's electricity with renewables, but also gets us the ability to move the cost of running that power plant to give it to the First Nation for running their power plant, which is a wind turbine.
The project cost nearly $18 million to complete, with most of the funding coming from Ottawa. The expected lifetime for the turbine is 25 years. With a population of roughly 150 people, the turbine generates more power than the community actually needs. Now, the question is what to do with it.
The way we look at this is, what can we do to make the best use of that?
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Destruction Bay.
The 13th annual Arctic Inspiration Prize was held this week in Ottawa. Each year, millions of dollars are awarded to projects in northern communities that commit to improving health, culture, traditional knowledge, and climate change and the economy. Governor General Mary Simon officially opened the celebration at the Rogers Centre in downtown Ottawa. A total of $3.7 million was awarded to 12 recipients this year. The largest prize of $1 million was awarded to Bibi Anatsaku for a groundbreaking initiative led by Yukon First Nations. It aims to establish a culturally rooted birth and reproductive health center in Whitehorse, and it supports more than 470 Indigenous and Yukon First Nation families.
This prize will help us expand our current scope and services for our Bibia Nasat, which means strong babies in Southern Shoshone language, with the purchase of a space to dedicate a culturally safe space for our families. In the Yukon and in many places across the north, sadly, families have to leave the community to give birth. They are separated from their children, they're separated from their families, and they're separated from their language and culture. And so this project will help us build a culturally appropriate support service, expand Indigenous midwifery in the Yukon.
We now want to tell you about this week's third web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, what should the new federal cabinet focus on? Your answers are the economy, safe drinking water, housing, energy projects, or all of the above. Go to our website at www.aptnnews.ca/polls to have your say. We'll post the results on the website and here on the Noon Show next week. A unique and one-of-a-kind conference to save res dogs will take place in Winnipeg this weekend. That interview when we come back. Stay with us. Starting on the east, St. John's 5, Charlottetown 26. 2 in Cartwright, La Grande River 14. Montreal 25, St. Jovite 24. Windsor 26, London 24. 20 in Sudbury, Thunder Bay 13. 1 in Churchill, Rain and Thompson at 4. 8 in Winnipeg, Gimli 6. 8 in Regina, Saskatoon 8. 4 in La Ronge, Stony Rapids -1. Showers in Peace River at 18, Fort McMurray 15. Showers in Lethbridge at 17, Calgary 15. Penticton 19, Campbell River 13. 18 in Fort Nelson, Smithers 14. 14 in Whitehorse, Dawson 15 and rain. 9 in Yellowknife, Fort Simpson partly cloudy and 12. Colville Lake 2, Polituck 2. -5 in Whale Cove, Chesterfield -4. And Iqaluit -3, Clyde River -7. Guest is with Save a Dog Network Canada. For the first time ever, the organization is hosting the Res Dog Networking Conference, scheduled to take place in Winnipeg this weekend at the Victoria Inn Hotel and Conference Centre. Organizers say the two-day conference will include advocates, rescuers, chief and councils, and community members, all united for a shared mission of humane and sustainable solutions for res dogs. Some of the discussions will include practical strategies to tackle dog overpopulation in communities and access to veterinary care. Katie Powell, the president and founder of Save a Dog Network Canada, and Tanisha Ginther, manager of Enoch Animal Services, joins us now to tell us more. Katie and Tanisha, thank you so much for chatting with us today. For those who don't know what the Res Dog Networking Conference in Winnipeg is, can you tell us more about the event and who some of the speakers will be?
Hi, yes, so we're hosting the Res Dog Networking Conference this week at the Victoria Inn. We have about 140 people registered from 24 different nations across Canada, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, some in Northern Ontario. We also have 12 rescues and shelters registered. And this conference is to bring together anybody that has a love for res dogs or is interested in helping provide resources and support for community-led programs across Canada.
Can you talk about some of the discussions that will take place at this conference for res dogs or dogs in First Nations?
Yes, so we're really excited that we're bringing together people from all across Canada to speak about specific issues regarding res dogs. Some of the topics will be about how to work together with non-Indigenous and Indigenous people to support community-led programs, how to get more resources and funding into areas that need it most. And basically just how to alleviate a lot of the suffering that goes on in these remote communities, as well as some of the barriers that Indigenous people face when trying to care for their animals.
And my next question is for Tanisha and Katie. Maybe both of you can kind of answer this one. Can you list off some of the concerns people in the community have for dogs in First Nations?
I've worked on a few reserves in Alberta now, and it seems to be the most likely ones are when dogs pack up, they become a big safety risk to members. Kids are afraid to walk to school, they're afraid to walk to their friend's house, to play hockey in the street. They're afraid that they have diseases, that some of those can spread to humans and become another safety risk. And there's a lack of resources for a lot of First Nations.
Yeah, for sure. And can you also explain what some of the solutions are to address these issues and how First Nations can access help?
I'm a big fan of community-led programs, so that's nations looking at their populations for both dogs and people and bringing in things like pet policies and bylaws that they can enforce to make sure that the dogs are healthy, that they're spayed and neutered and they're not breeding, that maybe some nations have the ability to make sure that the dogs are not free roaming, and there's also other ways to make sure that a community is safe in a free roaming dog community.
Katie or Tanisha, can you also explain how big of an issue this is right across our country? I go to many First Nations over in my career, and I've seen a lot of dogs at some First Nations, and some there's barely to little any dogs running around. So, some First Nations have programs and some don't.
I think the biggest thing for the nations that do have programs is they have some amazing community people who just banded together and said, we want change, we want safety, we want to do something, we want to lead this for our community. And those community members have taken ideas from non-Indigenous communities and just ran with it.
And I think it's really important to note that someone who's not Indigenous, that's what we love to see as outsiders, are community members that are willing to take the first step and then let us provide the resources from an outside support to gain the knowledge and strength within, so we can support community-led programs.
For any First Nations or chief and councils out there who may be seeing this, do you have a message for them in terms of how they can reach out and find out more information?
I think the best thing that Chief and Council can do is reach out to organizations that are local to them that have a program, whether that's Indigenous-led or non-Indigenous-led, and just ask for support. There's a lot of places out there and rescues and organizations that would love to sit down with Chief and Council and talk about what their biggest struggles are, and then help put a plan in place that's actually something that is sustainable. And I think that's the big thing here, is these programs that we bring in to First Nations have to be sustainable for the community.
And my last question, Katie, for those that are interested in this conference in Winnipeg for Saturday and Sunday this weekend and want to join, can they still sign up and go?
Absolutely. Also, we know that the Manitowoc Festival is going on right now. So anybody that wants to pop over to the Res Dog conference, they just have to show their pass and they're able to come in and join us. But there is still registrations if people want to come. They can just reach out to our social media page, private message us, or call us, and we'll be happy to accept them.
Katie and Tanisha, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To Australia now, almost 50 young people a day are being locked up in Queensland, with the state government saying that's proof its tough on crime laws are working. But First Nations justice advocates say the approach will continue the cycle of crime and are pleading for alternatives to jail. This report from NITV News.
The results of the Queensland Premier's controversial adult time for adult crime laws are in.
We promised a crackdown on youth crime, and everything we are doing is about delivering that.
The government's latest crime data shows an average of 47 young people are apprehended a day. In the first quarter of this year, over 4,000 young offenders were facing more than 18,000 charges.
The more you lock someone up, the more likely they are to be caught in a cycle of criminal offending.
The government says the crackdown has seen a 9% reduction in stolen vehicles and a 12% decline in break-ins compared to the same period last year. However, advocates argue that prison may not be an effective deterrent, instead fostering a pattern of reoffending.
What we know is those tough on crime laws don't work. There is no evidence anywhere in the world, let alone Australia, to say that increasing criminalisation works.
Community elders are calling for more programs to divert people away from the court system.
If we want to address the justice system, we need to address out-of-home care first, because that's where the kids are coming from. And if we can address that, we can stop a lot of kids going into crime. We want to prevent crime. We don't want to be the abusers of crime.
There are also concerns the legislation breaches UN conventions on the rights of the child. Dan Rennie, NITV News.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Friday. Dennis Ward is back for your evening newscast in a few hours. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, have a safe long weekend, and we will see you back here same time, same place next Tuesday. Thank you for watching. Excellent.